The only way out is in. The only way out is through. And we can speed that process up through certain practices. But you will have to confront that at some point. The inner beliefs, the inner emotions, the inner feelings that are holding you back from experiencing the kind of life that you want.
Ladies and Gentlemen, Dr. Alex Sky. Alex lebt in Ubud auf Bali, wo ich ihn beim Jaya Festival kennengelernt habe, und zwar bei seinem Talk zum Thema Mysteries of Life, der mich sehr inspiriert hat. Ich habe ihm richtig gerne zugehört und deshalb freue ich mich jetzt sehr, das Vergnügen mit dir teilen zu können. Herzlich willkommen zur 113. Podcast-Folge von 1000 First Steps, deinem Podcast für das Größte in dir. Mein Name ist Jakob Horvath und mir macht es immer so eine Riesenfreude, wenn ich dir hier im Podcast Menschen vorstellen kann, die mich auf meinen Reisen inspirieren, die ich kennenlernen durfte, die mir begegnet sind aufgrund der glücklichsten Fügungen des Universums und die mich dann dazu motivieren, die Geheimnisse des Lebens noch tiefer zu erkunden und die mir ihre Weisheit mitgeben und ihre Lebenserfahrung und ja, die ich dann auch dir zugänglich machen kann in diesem Podcast, was eines der schönsten Dinge überhaupt ist, warum es diesen Podcast gibt. Und genau das tun Alex und ich heute gemeinsam. Freue dich auf ein spannendes, tiefgreifendes und erhellendes Gespräch über unsere spirituelle Verbindung zum gesamten Universum, über die verkörperte menschliche Erfahrung, über Gesundheit und alles, was dazwischen liegt. Bevor wir gleich loslegen, aber habe ich noch ein paar Ankündigungen für euch, die mir sehr am Herzen liegen und auf die ich mich richtig freue, wo ich mich richtig darauf freue, das jetzt mit dir teilen zu können. Denn so gern ich meine Online-Arbeit auch habe, so sehr liebe ich es, mit Menschen persönlich zu sein, zu connecten, zu lachen, zu weinen, zu arbeiten, innerlich zu arbeiten, einander zu unterstützen und das am allerliebsten im Retreat-Setting, in einem Setting, wo wir gemeinsam Zeit verbringen und einander kennenlernen und miteinander connecten. Und deshalb hier Big News für alle Männer, die sich danach sehnen, eine neue Tiefe in sich selbst zu entdecken, Männlichkeit auf neue, gesunde Weise zu verkörpern und dabei eine tiefe Verbindung zur Natur und natürlich auch zu anderen Männern erleben wollen. Diesen Sommer leite und co-hoste ich 2 Männer-Retreats in Österreich und beide werden so richtig gut. Das spüre ich jetzt schon und ich kann euch gar nicht sagen, wie sehr ich mich darauf freue. Das ist auch eine Vision von mir, die da in Erfüllung geht, die ich da verwirkliche. Das erste Retreat, Brothers Alive, findet von 7. bis 9. Juli in der Hellsklamm im Wienerwald in Niederösterreich statt. Gemeinsam mit einem lieben Freund, dem Survival Trainer und Leadership Coach Werner Etzelsdorfer, kombinieren wir Männerarbeit mit Survival Training, Breathwork, Meditation und powervollen Connection und Embodiment Practices. Und zwar an einem sehr coolen, privaten Kraftplatz im Wald, der genau dafür ausgelegt ist, der uns ganz allein zur Verfügung steht. Und das Mannsein-Retreat für die Natur in dir leite ich von 2. bis 6. August mit Yoga- und Meditationslehrer Florian Balzinski am Irsee in Salzburg, ebenfalls an einem wunderschönen Ort, direkt am Bach mit den Bergen im Hintergrund. Ja, und dort gehen wir unseren Wurzeln als moderne Männer auf die Spur, beschäftigen uns mit männlichen Archetypen, sitzen gemeinsam in einer Schwitzhütte am Lagerfeuer, verbringen eine Visionsnacht im Wald, tauchen ein in schamanische Rituale und mehr. In beiden Retreats erwarten euch kraftvolle Container aus bewussten Männern auf eurer Wellenlänge, Herzensverbindungen, authentische Gespräche und viele Impulse, wie wir als selbstbewusste moderne Männer auf der Erde wirken, führen und lieben können. Die Links zu beiden Retreats findet ihr in den Shownotes. Außerdem habe ich gerade wieder 2 Plätze für mein One-on-One Deep Dive Programm geöffnet, bei dem ich dich mit Herz, Verstand und meiner jahrelangen Erfahrung als Coach, Meditationslehrer und leidenschaftlichem Entdecker des Lebens dabei unterstütze, dich in deiner Einzigartigkeit und authentischen Kraft kennen und lieben zu lernen. Weil Vielleicht willst du endlich die Entscheidung treffen, die du schon so lange vor dir herschiebst. Womöglich willst du endlich aufhören, dich selbst zu sabotieren und dir ständig Gedanken darüber zu machen, was die anderen wohl über dich denken und deine Entscheidungen danach ausrichten. Vielleicht willst du auf tieferer Ebene herausfinden, wer du wirklich bist, was dich ausmacht und warum du hier bist. Vielleicht magst du Blockaden und Limitierungen lösen, die dich schon viel zu lange davon abhalten, selbstbewusst deinen eigenen Weg zu gehen, deine Träume zu verwirklichen und dein volles Potenzial zu leben, das die Welt so dringend braucht. Und wenn du bei diesen Worten Resonanz spürst und dir bei dem einen oder anderen Satz jetzt gedacht hast, ja, das würde ich doch so gerne endlich verwirklichen, ins Leben bringen, ändern in meinem Leben, Verantwortung übernehmen für mein Leben, für meinen Herzensweg, für meine Träume und Visionen, dann lass uns einander kennenlernen und schauen, ob wir ein energetisches Match sind. Du kannst dich mit einem kostenlosen Discovery Call für die 3-monatige Coaching-Reise mit mir bewerben und auch dazu stelle ich dir den Link in die Shownotes. Und jetzt zurück zur heutigen Podcast-Folge, zurück zu Alex Sky, der in Südafrika aufgewachsen ist, in Kapstadt, wo er immer schon gerne viel Zeit im Wasser verbracht hat, in der Natur, wo ihn seine unbändige Neugierde viel lesen hat lassen, viel lernen und studieren hat lassen und er hat sich dabei immer wieder unzählige Fragen übers Leben gestellt, vor allem an seine Mutter damals. Und in seinen ersten 11 Lebensjahren hat es vorrangig nur ihn und seine Mutter gegeben, denn dann erst hat er seinen biologischen Vater kennengelernt. Und seinen ersten spirituellen Kontakt, an den er sich gut erinnern kann, beschreibt Alex im Alter von 7 Jahren erlebt zu haben. Sein Leben war und ist geprägt von der Suche nach einer Wahrheit, nach Wissen. Und besonders interessant auf diesem Weg ist für ihn dann die fernöstliche Weisheit geworden, bei der Suche nach dieser allumfassenden, einen absoluten Wahrheit. Mit 17 Jahren war sein Interesse für die chinesische Medizin dann so stark, dass er sich dazu entschieden hat, traditionell chinesische Medizin für 5 Jahre in Kapstadt zu studieren und seine eigene Praxis zu eröffnen.
The law of correspondence is the first one that needs to be worked on before the law of attraction and manifestation. So when I realized this, I realized I could never have everything and anything that I want outside of myself until I manifest that inside of myself, which means doing the inner work. It means to do the shadow work, it means to do the cleanup work.
Wir sprechen über die Praxis des Non-Attachments, welche Facetten die innere Arbeit haben kann, um Yin und Yang in Balance zu bringen und Licht wie Schatten in unser Leben zu integrieren. Außerdem diskutieren wir darüber, ob die Unterteilung in richtig und falsch, in gut und böse uns als Menschen wirklich weiterbringt und wie uns eine höhere Perspektive zu Vergebung und Mitgefühl verhilft. Selbst gegenüber Schwerverbrechern und dem, was wir allgemein als böse bezeichnen. Wir hatten beide mehrmals Gänsehaut während dieses sehr tiefgründigen und offenen Gesprächs und ich freue mich, wenn du mir deine Gedanken, deine Kommentare, vielleicht auch deine Fragen zu diesem Interview auf Instagram dalässt. Da findest du mich unter @jakob.horvath und jetzt Vorhang auf für Alex Sky und The Mysteries of Life. Schön, dass du da bist.
Cheers.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers. Good morning.
Good morning. Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi. Drinking sweet, amazing fresh coconut
Kelapa
water
air.
with you, Alex, on your beautiful terrace here in your home in Ubud. Good morning.
Good morning, brother.
It's so good to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for coming here. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's just 3 minutes from my place. Literally, we are almost neighbors.
It's like almost all parts of Bali are, 3 or 30 minutes away.
Yeah, right.
If it's not 3 minutes, it's 30 minutes. If it's not 30 minutes, it's 3 hours, and there's nothing further than that. So
Right, and depends on the traffic too.
It does depend on the
Yeah,
traffic.
it gets a bit crazy these days. Hey, Alex, I'm so honored to have you on the podcast. Seriously.
Honored to be here.
Listening to your talk a week ago on the Jaya Fest. I feel so blessed, grateful for this opportunity to be here. I feel like it's a privilege, be in Bali, going to these events, meeting these amazing people. And for me, this podcast is really also a great opportunity to share this, you know, kind of have people be part of those experiences and also meet those inspiring people that I'm allowed to meet here. So yeah, you're certainly one of those. Your talk greatly inspired me. Your talk on the mysteries of life. It's beautiful. Alex, could you give us a little impression of, you know, yourself, who you are, what you feel like sharing about your story that you feel is relevant right now? But before we start, just let me know how you feel, what's present for you right now.
Sure, right now, like the good stuff, you know, bliss. I'm feeling quite blissed out this morning. Calm, peaceful, grounded, centered. I'm in that kind of process at the moment in the last week, so yeah, it's been pretty consistent for me. I got to spend several hours in the sun yesterday, so
Got your tan on.
exactly, got all the vitamin D, you know. So my mood is like happy. I'm feeling great. So
Great.
excited for this podcast. Yeah.
Yes, me too.
To just talk and share and.
So, who are you, Alex? And I know this is a huge question.
I think it's, I don't know, for me it's quite a small, simple question. I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can complicate it, you know, we can talk about this and that and this and that, but for me, my journey has led me to a very simple, profound realization that I'm just awareness. That is really who I am. Is just an observer, a being of this experience, you know. And I identify with that being more than anything. So everything else for me is just a play, it's just a game. It is a charade, a parade. It's putting on masks, taking off masks, you know. But doing it in reverence, you know, for life, in awe and wonder at the beauty of life. So it's not treating life, you know, as if it's something not to be honored and respected, just because, you know, things are changing all the time. It's deeply personal and meaningful and impactful and all of those things, but at the same time, I don't feel bound and attached, you know, as we were speaking before the podcast, you know, this, I really try to live my life through non-attachment. Non-attachment is really one of my core principles that I try to live by. And I make a distinguishing discernment there between non-attachment and detachment. So, you know, in Buddhism, they spoke about attachment and detachment. And I always had a problem with this. And I was like, I don't resonate with this. And then I stumbled across the word non-attachment. This was when I was maybe 13. And I resonated deeply with this word because there's a story, you know. The story is you become attached to something, it becomes pleasurable, and then you realize it has a control over you, it's too much, so then you detach, which is painful, you know. And then you just keep attaching and detaching and attaching and detaching. But then you realize there's another place and another state that you can go to, non-attachment, which is being present with what is in front of you, connecting and disconnecting, but not attaching, not fixating, not, you know, not all these things. And this is how I experience myself, you know. So who I am is really no different to you. It is a bunch of memories and emotions and thoughts and stories, a past, a present, and a future. But what I identify with is the observer, the witness, which allows me to connect to Source and stay connected all the time and be a channel and be a conduit, you know, for greater truth, for insights, for wisdom, for all of these things, because I just want to be of service to humanity. So
it's beautiful. It reminds me of when you think about yourself, let's say 10 years ago or like 20 years ago, like, or as a child, it was the same observer. It was the same awareness. It was the same soul that was looking out into the world through the senses. And could you take us on a journey into your life where you realized, okay, things were quite different for you at that time, and it helped you to realize what you just shared.
So I had some, what I feel are very, very profound experiences when I was a toddler, when I was a young child.
You grew up in South Africa, right?
I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa, and I always had a very deep connection to nature, deep love for nature, for the elements, you know, for the ocean, for water. I used to spend a lot of time in the water, for the wind, for trees, plants. I used to climb a lot of trees, and I was fortunate enough to be taken into nature a lot by my mother. I was mostly a single child for most of my life till the age of like 11. I never met my biological father until I was 11. So it was just my mom and I. Had a lot of really great childhood friends. We would connect a lot in nature together. So I spent a lot of time outdoors. And this allowed me to connect with what I feel the principles of life, like the core principles of life, which nature contains. You know, I feel nature contains these principles, these ways, you know, these laws, you could say, you know, and they over time became infused in me. I feel like I was very open to them. There's many things I've realized over the years which make sense about my childhood, which I never knew before. Like, for example, in the human design system, I'm a self-projected projector, and I have all these open centers. These are the only two chakras or centers that I have defined, which means they spin.
The throat and the heart.
The throat and the heart, yeah, and the G center. So they have their own defined spin, but the rest are responding to the environment. And I used to take in a lot of information when I was younger. Like, I was a bookworm. I just used to absorb books, you know, just drink them. I'd just be spending time at home just drinking books. And if I wasn't doing that, I was in trees, you know, just climbing trees, hanging out in nature. And I think my first experience with like spirit and this kind of existential consciousness of experiencing the observer was at around like, I was around 7 years old, 6 or 7. And I kept hearing the sound of this. It was like a sound that would translate as a feeling in my body. And it would happen when I was like often tired, like exhausted, and just relaxing, you know. So I'd be like playing all afternoon in the playground, in the jungle gym with kids. And then I'd just be like lying somewhere, or like hanging off of the jungle gym, you know, and then I would experience this sound body motion, which I can only describe as like a sigh. It was like as if someone or something was breathing and whispering in my ear, kind of thing, you know. And then I had this existential feeling of infinity and eternity, like experiencing the expanse of the universe, like timelessness, spacelessness, you know. And it was very scary. Like in one moment it would be blissful, and I'd be like, "Whoa, this is like, you know, I feel like I'm in heaven." And then in another moment it would be like, "Whoa, I'm all alone. You know, I'm alone, and there's nothing else."
So yeah, you were 7 years old, right?
Yeah, I was really young, you know. And that never left me. That kind of carried through my life, and it repeated at certain events throughout my life. But you know, time is not just linear; it's cyclical. It's both. Like in phi or phi fractal ratio, the symbol for phi is a line and a circle. It's represented that way for a reason, because 3.142 is a progression, it's a sequence, and so is Fibonacci sequence. So 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 1 is 3, 3 + 2 is 5. This progressive compound effect of adding on to the previous is linear and cyclical, because you're taking what happened before and adding now to what is occurring tomorrow. But you're moving through time.
That's the pattern how the universe expands, basically, right? How galaxies are formed in a spiral way, but you can also see it everywhere in nature.
Exactly.
On snails and on plants.
Snails, seashells, flowers, like trees as well. Trees all grow in Fibonacci. They send one branch out, and then another branch out, and then 2, and then 3, and then 5. And that's why there's so many more branches at the top, because the tree and the plants spiral out like that. And I experienced this in my life, you know, like having deeply spiritual events and then having deeply confusing human experiences that would contrast that, you know. So from a very young age, I went on like a seeking truth, seeking knowledge in books, through people, through experiences. Somewhat isolated, somewhat solitary, but my birth sign in astrology is Leo, so I'm actually quite social. I love being around people, but my moon is in Scorpio, so I love to like retreat and just be with my thoughts and emotions and experience them, you know, and read books and experience what those evoke in me as well. So yeah, like from a young age, deep interest in nature, spirituality, the meaning of life, constantly asking all these questions. I used to exhaust my mom with all the questions like, why are we here? And what's the reason? And what's the purpose? But what is it all for? You know, and like,
what did your mom say?
I'd freak out. My mom had this amazing library of books. So she would just be like, here, read this book, you know, or like, she'd be like, I don't have an answer for you, or
could you just go play with your friends?
Yeah, pretty much. She would feel that way sometimes. Yeah, and then that led me to, you know, Chinese medicine. When I was 17, I kind of like came across this family friend, this young guy in his 20s who was studying it. And he was like 7 years older than me. He was a good friend of mine now. And he had all these notes from his classes and this fat textbook. And I was to borrow it, and I borrowed the textbook. And I fell in love with Chinese medicine at 17. So I started biology in grade 11, and last term of grade 11. And, you know, you're supposed to have done it from grade 10, from standard 8. I went straight into it at the end of standard 11. And then, end of standard 9, grade 11. And then grade 12, standard 10, I just like studied biology just to get into Chinese medicine, and I got in. And then from year 1, I was hooked.
So you really wanted it, huh?
I really wanted it, yeah.
What hooked you in Chinese medicine? What's for people who have maybe heard about it, but don't really know what it is? What's the fascination for you about Chinese medicine? So, yeah, I've always had an interest in Eastern philosophy. I did martial arts from the age of 6. I've done like karate, judo, Muay Thai from 11. I did for 7 years. I did Kung Fu for 7 years from 17 to 24. And I've always been interested in the Eastern way of thinking. It's always fascinated me, you know. But I'd never gone that deep into that theory because the Chinese people, the Chinese government, the Communist Party is very good at keeping their knowledge secret. And they don't actually want the deeper truths of Chinese medicine and the insights to land in all parts of the world. They actually want to hold it for themselves. Because they know how powerful it is.
Yeah, exactly. They know how like precious it is, you know. And it's imbued in their philosophy of Confucianism and Taoism that when you have something very precious, you don't just show it off to the world, because then everyone's going to want it, you know. So I was lucky to have found this university in Cape Town, University of the Western Cape, School of Natural Medicine, where they have Chinese medicine, a 5-year degree. The main and almost only reason they have that there is because of the relationship between South Africa and China. You know, they have these very strong relationship, and it's because of the herbal medicine. China was very interested in South African herbs, local herbs, and figuring out the properties, quantifying, and then exporting to China. So it was a mutually beneficial relationship, you know. So when I came across this deep knowledge in this textbook, I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I've never come across before. And it just blew my mind, you know. It blew me into a whole nother paradigm of perceiving reality, of understanding and experiencing reality, you know, in a way I'd never experienced before. And that's what hooked me. And then by year 1, I was just fascinated with the system because it was so deep and so complex and so complete, so whole. and holistic that I was like, wow, this is a real way to heal people, to bring people sustainable, long-lasting healing where you actually see results, you know.
Could you give us an example to understand better what it is that was so deep, so profound, and so complete for you?
So it began with yin-yang theory, like just understanding the complexity of the yin-yang. You know, most people look at the symbol and they're like, balance, you know, but it's so much deeper than that. So the original symbol of yin-yang is two koi fish that are swimming around each other in a pool. And it's represented either by a white and black koi fish or red and white, or red and black, or orange and black. The colors have changed. And the eye of the one koi fish is the color of the other koi fish. And so they contain within them a part of each other. So one of the fundamental principles of yin-yang theory is that everything in nature is balanced, right? Everything is balancing each other out. But at the same time, everything contains an aspect of each other. And this plays on holographic theory within quantum physics and modern theories in physics. And particle physics and energetic physics is that in holographic theory, the part contains the whole, and the whole contains all parts of that whole. And which is what spiritual traditions try to tell us since thousands of years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. But when it's represented as something two-dimensional, it's a concept that's much easier to grasp. And this is why I feel the Chinese have, placed such an importance in creating these written theories and these intellectual theories on the nature of reality and existence, because they're easier to grasp. Because when you begin reading the words, it begins to make a shift in your consciousness, in your understanding of your own emotions, your inner world, your outer world, that shifts you into a whole new state of existence, of being. And I felt this happening in me, and it was profound.
How did you feel that?
Yeah, explosions of energy, bliss, waves of like shivers and tingling. I'm getting it right now, kind of like down the spine, this feeling of electricity, these waves of emotion, of bliss, of joy, of truth. It's like realization of the nature of things, which I was ignorant of before. So it's going from ignorance to understanding.
I love how you say the inner standing. I think you mentioned it for the third time now. What's inner standing for you compared to understanding?
Yeah, so for me, understanding is like receiving information from, an authority. It's like the knowledge you get from the media and, the kind of like laws that are laid down by the government. Whereas the inner standing is standing within yourself. It's like, what is your truth? And what is your knowing? Right. Because once you experience something several times, you can't unexperience it anymore.
It's your truth.
It's your truth.
It's your reality.
Yeah. And the only thing that's going to challenge that is someone else's truth who opposes that. And then you got to stay strong in it, And this is where martial arts played a huge role in my life, was like, I have the right to protect my truth and defend it with my life if that's what I want to do, because I have free will, And these principles are, for me, at the basis, the foundation of a healthy society. Because if every human being doesn't feel this way about themselves and their own life, they're going to be susceptible to control, to influence, to manipulation. And we see this in almost every country in the world playing out in all different kinds of ways, But that's what led me to Bali, was to live a life more of freedom. Because the paradoxical irony of me living here is that many of the people who live here in Bali live under control of the government, but not as a foreigner. Because you're outside the system, Much in the same way.
You mean Balinese people live under the control of the authorities, of the government? Yeah. And as a foreigner, you live a pretty free life.
Yeah, so the Balinese kind of encourage you to learn their ways and to practice their ways. And I do, I'm very open to that, but I'm not going to become Balinese. I'm going to always be me and stay who I am. And so I bring a different gift to Bali itself, because I'm coming from another land with another energy, infusing that into this land. And I know that the land is grateful for that, because that is what this land wants. Bali is very much a place for the ascension of humanity. I feel that. It's an international holiday hotspot. It's attracting people from all kinds of walks of life, and it's bringing their consciousness, their microbiome, their bacteria, their viruses into this environment. It's a cooking pot, you know, it's a soup, a salsa. It's a chemical, intellectual, spiritual experiment, a massive one going down here in Bali, and it's powerful. I think the energetic exchange is going on, the software upgrades that are occurring inside of us, outside of us, the physical upgrades are like nowhere else on the planet. And it's actually spreading, because people are coming in here, they're gaining something, they're giving something, and they're taking something back with them, you know? And that's profound.
It's like really amplifying energies, I feel. Like it's wherever you are in your life and whatever there is for you to learn at that moment, Bali is kind of delivering it like in 10 times speed. I feel like sometimes it can be really painful and overwhelming as well, as many people experience it.
Totally.
Me included. So
that's my understanding of Bali is it amplifies everything. You come here, just amplifies the shadow and the light and the dark and all of it.
And that's such a good keyword, the shadow and the light now, because maybe we can come back to the kois, to the fishes, to the yin and the yang. I loved how you explained that. How would that apply now into everyday life, into our human experience of pain and pleasure and light and shadow, and this grander awareness of the whole is in the part and the part is in the whole, or as Rumi puts it, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in the drop. How would that apply to our modern everyday life?
I think for me the biggest word that comes up is community. And you feel that here in Bali, right? I think that's, as Westerners, that's something that we've become very deprived of and scared of. We fear community because community means giving something up. You know, giving up a part of your freedom, or giving up a part of your time, or giving up a part of your, or sacrificing something, you know, for someone else, for something else. And the Balinese don't fear that at all. They know that that is an integral part of life. It's probably the most important part. In one sense, we're monkeys, right? We're part of the ape family. We have the same kind of anatomy and physiology internally and externally. We're just more intelligent. And when you observe them in the wild, they are always together. They're in troops, right? Almost all animals occur in groups. And there's a beautiful, example, tragic, painful, but beautiful, in the documentary Jane, on, what's Jane's last name? She spent time with like the chimps, chimpanzees.
Oh, Jane Goodall.
Jane Goodall, yeah. In her documentary, there's the one chimp that, gets isolated, and then all of his fellow apes, all of his fellow chimps, they all die because they get a disease from the British coming in and setting up these camps, and they carried all these viruses with them and these diseases, and then they ate their foods and they got sick and they died, and he was left alone, and he literally died of loneliness because he couldn't eat, he had no one to care for or to be cared by, be cared for and by. And he just got extremely depressed. He just sat in a tree and literally starved and got sick and died. And that is an example of what happens to so many humans who isolate, right? They work too hard, they push too hard, men and women who are providing for families, households. Maybe they work a very important job position and they take their work too seriously, and they just spend their whole life working, and they become isolated. Their life loses meaning because they don't enjoy their life anymore. They have no more joy. There's no more joy. They're empty. And then they don't see the point in living anymore, and they just want to end their life. So community is the biggest thing with this interdependence of the yin and the yang. It's showing us that we're all interconnected. In one sense, we're one, you know, and that needs to be nourished. It needs to be a priority for day-to-day life, that we're not alone. And there's a secret message, hidden message in the word alone as well. All one.
Wow.
Yeah. So when we feel alone is actually when we're one with everything. Because we are all alone.
That's what calls us back.
Exactly, that as well.
The feeling of feeling alone calls us back to connect back with others.
I don't feel that that is a good place to respond from necessarily, because you haven't reached the end of it, you haven't reached the full depth of it. When that feeling of aloneness dissolves, that is the right time to reintegrate, I feel. For the most part, I think if you're desperate and you're in need, you know, of someone to care for you, or just to make you feel accepted and safe and secure, yes, by all means, but there is a gift within going into the depths of that feeling of aloneness and going deeper and deeper and deeper and touching the bottom. Because in that place, you realize there is no such thing as aloneness. Because if I'm in my home, there's just someone, you know, a walk outside to have a conversation with across over the wall to dissolve that feeling of aloneness. And I'm choosing it. I'm choosing to be alone, you know. And then on an even more metaphysical, grander spiritual level, that feeling of aloneness connects you with God. It connects you with the all of creation. Lao Tzu in the book, the Tao Te Ching, the Way of Virtue, he said, the world can be known, experienced, seen, heard, and felt, all within the confines of your home. You do not need to step out of your door to experience life. You can experience all the senses within your home. And I read the Tao Te Ching in my early 20s over and over and over again, and I contemplated it deeply, and that's one of the extracts that stood out to me. And I spent a lot of time with myself, alone in isolation. And I would experience the world. I would have these visions. I would experience sounds, you know, and sights that would give me insights into the nature of reality and existence. Technology allows us to do this even more, because we can look at what someone else is doing halfway across the world, and we can get a feeling for what is occurring in that space. Through this two-dimensional image, we can penetrate on an imaginary level into the three-dimensional reality that is occurring there, and imagine. And within the imagination is a power, you know, because I, magi, or I am a magician. So to imagine is not merely something fictitious that should be discarded and disregarded as like unimportant and childish or childlike.
As we tell to kids, you have a wild imagination.
Yeah, we almost put it down and we judge it and we label it and we put it down as like inferior, you know. It's much better to have a high intellect, you know, and to have all this knowledge and this information, but to have an imagination is to have a power of connection with reality itself, with the nature of the field. You know, and this is where we step into laws like the power of manifestation and the power of correspondence and the law of attraction, is by realizing that when you imagine your life, you're actually creating it. Because now you're giving the field something to work with. Because if your mind is empty, you're just going to create emptiness around you, because the field just imitates what is inside of you. So if you imagine a better life, you will begin to create it, because now it's inside of you. And by the law of yin and yang, everything that is inside must be reflected outside to complete it. Everything is trying to complete itself, right?
Because that's the very law of existence.
It's cycles.
Existence and nature always strives for harmony, for balance, for completeness.
Yeah. Like spring comes around every year, summer comes around every year, winter comes around every year. You know, but we're moving through the discomfort and the bliss and the joy of each and every one.
This too shall pass, one of the very oldest teachings.
Yeah. And a 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. I love the name of your podcast. Yeah, it's beautiful. 1,000 steps. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you. The laws of nature. I feel this could be a very good topic to dive a little bit more deeper now. Especially because it translates so well into everyday life's experience. Like when we talk about, okay, let's put a very practical example. Someone suffering, okay? Someone who might be listening and he's in pain, physical pain, emotional pain. He might go through a heartbreak, or he might just lose his job, or, struggle with money, or whatever it is. When you can connect deeper to those very, very existential laws of the universe, and see that all comes in a cycle, and that whatever happens right now is here for a reason, to deliver a message to you, so that you can integrate that into your inner system, your inner standing, your imagination, and then create something more purposeful, something more out of your own conscious choice. What would you say? What is one of the laws of nature that once you understood it, really, or understood it, was a complete game changer for you in your life?
Yeah, the law of correspondence. Because this book, The Secret.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually give you the whole secret. It only gives you part.
Yeah.
And it's very clever. They do that on purpose because they're trying to hook you. So the law of attraction and the law of manifestation are incomplete in themselves. They require a preceding law to be mastered first. And the law of correspondence is hidden. I think it's like the 8th or the 9th Hermetic principle. So in the principles that Hermes created, or Thoth, they're like the same person in Greek and Egyptian mythology or history. This principle is hidden as, not as made to be not as important as it actually is. And if you only understand this if you study all the Hermetic principles and you start weaving them together and see their interconnectedness and how they interrelate to one another. The law of correspondence is the first one that needs to be worked on before the law of attraction and manifestation. So when I realized this, I realized I could never have everything and anything that I want outside of myself until I manifest that inside of myself. Which means doing the inner work. It means to do the shadow work. It means to do the cleanup work, cleaning up house, And that means hygiene, getting high off of your genes, So it means confronting the ancestral karma of all the inherited patterns that I had received from my mother, my father, and my grandparents, These patterns of behavior, of speech, of thought, of emotion, that were holding me back from creating the version of myself that I wanted to be, based on the vision that I have, And so, yeah, the best advice I can give for anyone, based on that experience, is to focus on that first. Focus on what's holding you back. What inner emotions are holding you back, Feelings of victimization and grief and despair and hopelessness and pain. Dive into those first, transmute them and transform them through observing them, and then through practicing methods of release, breath work, kundalini, martial arts, painting, dance, music, any kind of creativity can get these emotions out, right? And then we develop the understanding, because when the emotion comes to the mind has to make sense of it somehow. So we sharpen the mind like a tool, like a knife, by exposing the mind to more material and content to contemplate. Because the mind operates predominantly through contemplation, not analysis, not dissecting. Like these methods of mentality and mentation are purely for practical methods. They're a form of masculine thinking, right? Whereas the feminine way, which is predominant, should be predominant. That's where the word right comes from. To be right or correct is to use your right brain, not your right hand. And this is where the inversion of the human condition has created an external wrong perception, you know, because to use your left hand is actually right. It's right-brained. It's correct to use your left hand because the left hand is the yin part of the body. It's the feminine. And to act from the feminine is to act from gentility, to be gentile, to be soft, to be caring, compassionate, understanding. To act from the right is to act with aggression and dominance and control and all these things. And this part should only really be used for self-defense. This part is used for living and gathering and creating, producing, supporting, taking care of, you know. So, yeah, I'm giving unsolicited advice, but it's all about sharing, right? If I could, you know, if my share could help anyone, it's to go in. You know, the only way out is in. The only way out is through. And we can speed that process up through certain practices. But you will have to confront that at some point. The inner beliefs, you know, the inner emotions, the inner feelings that are holding you back from experiencing the kind of life that you want and having what you want, whether it be more money or a life partner, you know, or that nice car or that nice home or whatever it is. You can have those things without guilt. But, you know, by the law of yin and yang and polarity, everything has an opposite as well. So if you buy a new car, you're going to have to take care of it. It's, you know, it's going to cost you to maintain that car. So do you actually want to do that? Or do you want to use public transport, you know? So there's pros and cons to everything. You know, the public transport is that you have to sit amongst other people, but the benefit is you don't have to take care of that vehicle at all. You don't have to service that bus or that train, you know, or that taxi. That's left to someone else to take responsibility for. But on the other side, like if you have your own vehicle, you don't have to share it with anyone, you know. You can keep it clean. It can make you feel good. You can develop a relationship with it. You can have your favorite music playing in it, you know. But then you have to take care of it. So it's approaching reality, your reality, with sensibility, with balance, seeing the light and the shadow constantly, and not ignoring either one. Because some of us even ignore the light. We don't always all just ignore the shadow. Some of us ignore the light. I don't deserve that. I'm not good enough for that. You know? That can send you into a whole nother reality that's just not benefiting you, you know? Just as much as I'm a piece of shit and I only deserve this. So there's like the inversion and the attachment. The aversion or the avoidance and the attachment can occur in both directions. But
like one of the main Buddhist principles, basically, right? When Buddha said this is where all suffering comes from, either the aversion or the attachment to whatever is, because everything that is, and if I understand that correctly, I just try to rephrase that to give a different perspective. It's like there is no right or wrong, right? It's like everything has its light and its shadow. Everything in existence.
And the common man and woman hate that statement. There's no such thing as right and wrong, especially if you're religious, because it challenges ethics and morality.
Oh, for sure.
You know? But the idea is not that there's no such thing as evil. The idea is that there's no such thing as bad. It's just that the statement's incomplete, you know? Lao Tzu said, there's no such thing as good and bad. Only thinking makes it so. That's what he said. So he's saying that thought is the basis for good and bad. And as you begin to think, things will separate themselves into good and bad, right and wrong. And that's not wrong. That in itself is not wrong.
Well, let's challenge this thought, because I think it's important. Like, how can it not be wrong to sexually abuse a child, for example? From that perspective.
Yeah, that's an extreme example.
I know, it's a hard one.
I'm happy to run with that one.
Like, I'd love you to
I can break it down.
Reflect on that, yes, please.
Because these are all things I've contemplated already, you know, like as someone who, I'm a philosopher at heart, like that's my greatest passion. Philosophy. Philosophy means love for Sophia. Philo means love, Sophia is the divine feminine. So philosophy is love for all material existence, and therefore trying to understand it in endless, numerous ways. So, you know, it's like, why? You've got to ask the question, why? Why does someone assault a child? You know, why does someone rape a child? You know, you've got to understand them first, because if you don't try to understand them, you don't see them as part of the whole. Now you see them as separate from yourself.
Yes.
You see them as disconnected, something to be destroyed. And this is the schism and the problem with Western thinking, is that things need to be deleted. But even in computer systems, if you delete something, there's still always a tiny little impression of that thing in the hard drive. You know, there's ways to recover hard drives with light impressions, because when, you know, in silicon-based technologies, there's impressions that are made, right? Because the silicon technology is storage of memory, which is not really different to water, because we see how in Masaru Emoto's work, the Japanese researcher, that water crystals can hold memory. I don't know if you've seen this.
Yes. Yeah, you expose it to like beautiful classical music and you get the most beautiful kind of crystals.
Exactly.
And you expose it to like dark heavy metal music or like bad cursing words and would like turn all crap.
Exactly. So in the same way, silicon is a more inferior, it's a less superior form of memory holding to water. That's why I believe human beings are the most advanced technology on the planet.
75% water?
Yeah, 75% water.
Yeah.
And then most of that water is structured. It's H3O2 minus, not H2O actually. Most people don't know this, because when water comes into contact with the positively charged surface, which is your DNA and your cell membranes, because your cell membranes and your DNA is made up of protein and fat. And protein and fat have a net positive charge, which causes the water to restructure itself accordingly in response, right? It's responding to its environment, as everything does, to become negatively charged, to balance out the positive charge. So most water is H3O2 negative. It holds a negative charge, which means the water in your body is charged, which means it's ready to reorganize, restructure itself. That's what gives it its crystalline properties. It's able to crystallize itself. You know, this is where memory is held in the body. Like, memory is not all in the brain. A lot of memory is in the body. But to come back to the topic and the question, you know, we're a community. Like, we're all water, and the water is flowing into us and it's flowing out of us. So the very ideas of culture and differences of language, you know, and skin tone and hair color, these are the things that keep us separate, right? Our religion, our culture, they make us see other people as separate. And so we have this programming already. So when we see and we're looking at someone who's maybe, you know, in a courthouse on the stand and the jury is judging him for raping a child, like, you immediately see that person as separate, because you would never do that. You know, most people in that jury house or in that courthouse who see that man as evil, they see him as separate, because I would never do that. I would never rape a child. So he's wrong, because I would never do that, and he did it, and I consider that wrong. I would never do that because it's wrong, so he's wrong. You know, but why did he do that? What was his reason? The interviews with these psychopaths, sociopaths, murderers have found them to be deeply traumatized, insecure, sick children. Their inner child is so fractured and broken. They've developed a belief system and a system of thinking and feeling that is constantly on the self-defense. Because we all have needs, right? Everything has needs. We take from nature, we give back. We take in the community, we give back. We take from our parents as children. What do we give back? What we can. Sometimes for our parents, our joy is enough. You know, our parents give to us and they receive the reward of joy, to see their children happy. There's constantly giving and taking. So when a man, a rapist, takes from an innocent child, that is a form of behavior that is formed because of what happened in the past. Something happened to him to create that learned behavior, that pattern, that is okay for him to do, because he has needs. So when he takes because he has a need that he's trying to fulfill, right? Often in those kind of men, it's unfulfilled sexual desires, you know? If someone goes, sexual energy is very powerful. If it goes repressed, if it goes unreleased, it can make you go crazy. This is what I've come to understand in Chinese medicine, is the sexual energy is born in the lower abdomen. In Chinese medicine, we talk about this as the dantian, which means cinnabar field. Cinnabar is a mineral in China that was mined everywhere, which means it's universal, which means all people have access to it. So unlike gold, cinnabar was a common mineral. You could find it at almost every shop, on every corner. Everyone was selling it. It was a very useful mineral, all mineral at the time. Gold was very precious and hard to find. So they named this energy source in the lower abdomen as cinnabar, because we all have access to it. Doesn't matter if you're a king and you're super royal, or you're a poor man on the street. You still have access to this energy. And what is interesting is that your small intestine is located there. So this energy that you're drawing on, this kundalini, this sexual energy, this life force, this inner fire, right, that is building the red flame. We call it the red flame as well. It's this heat, this infrared heat, this metabolic heat that is built up in your lower abdomen, generated from your small intestine, your sacral chakra. That is your sexual fire. If that goes repressed, if it goes unreleased, unredirected, if it becomes stagnant, bottled up, it creates anger, rage, resentment, bitterness. It causes you to act out in ways that are completely illogical, unconscious, reactive, and in a way, you could say self-protective and defensive, because that energy is now eating you up inside. It's injuring you, it's hurting you, you know. So people who become distorted in their mind, who don't develop the right ethics and morals to behave in the right way, which is right, feminine, it's right-brained, right? To do the right thing is to think in the feminine way, which is all-inclusive. So what is incorrect about the thinking and the behaviors of a rapist is that they haven't actually imagined what it's going to be like for that creature or that person or that thing to experience itself doing that thing to it. Right?
They didn't bring the compassion to that other being, otherwise they wouldn't do it.
Because they don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
Because that is something learned.
Right.
It's a learned behavior, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these...
Gives me goosebumps when I listen to that, yeah.
And it brings me back to a saying by Lao Tzu in one of his teachings in the Tao Te Ching, which is, the good man is the bad man's teacher. But the bad man is the good man's work. Because if the good man has no work, he becomes a bad man. We all need work. We need something to do. This is why life is created the way that it is.
And the bad man is the good man's work because he's triggering him.
That as well, yeah. They both become the work for each other. And by finding healing, by the good man being rewarded for his growth, for his wisdom, his knowledge, his difficult choices that he made. He chose the difficult path, you know, of non-attachment, of non-addiction, of, you know, choosing abstinence over compulsions, you know. Then now he's rewarded with the growth of the bad man, the change, the transformation, seeing how the bad man has become a good man, a slightly better man every day. And we see this in prison systems where certain inmates choose to become librarians, you know. They choose to read books and to grow and to philosophize and to write poetry and to change, you know. And they experience retribution, you know.
Because they all have that capacity inside of themselves.
Exactly.
From it's their very birthright of every human being.
Exactly.
And this is where we meet, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I think you quoted Rumi in your talk. Can you quote him again? Like, beyond right or wrong, beyond good or bad? I love that quote, but I think you can quote it better than...
Yeah, it's quite a long one, but this is like the summarized version, is that beyond ideas of right and wrong, beyond ideas of good and evil, is a field. I'll meet you there. And he's talking about the field of consciousness. He's talking about the field of energy that is woven between all of us. So where do bad men come from? Where do rapists come from? They're a product of society.
Right.
They're a product of being misunderstood, neglected, shunted, abused as well. We see, and it's becoming more and more common knowledge in the public arena field, that abusers were often abused. We see this with like bullies in schools, like young boys who bully other boys. They usually have abusive fathers, who smack them around and tell them that they're, talk down to them, you're a piece of shit.
Gabor Mate shows that really well in The Wisdom of Trauma, when they stand in this prison with like 200 or I don't know how many inmates in a circle, and then they like speak through a loudspeaker and okay, every one of you, and they were like heavy guys, murderers, rapists, all that. And then they asked everyone who has been abused in his own childhood sexually, one step forward. And like 80% did one step forward. And then everyone who has grown up without a father, one step forward. And then like another 75% one step forward. And that's so touching. It's so touching because you can suddenly feel compassion for these human beings, and you can suddenly realize that like, oh my God, it's like touching me now.
I know, I'm also feeling it. I'm getting shivers and feeling a lot of grief and sadness as well.
Because it means that if I would have made the same experiences as this human being, I would have done exactly the same. I would have raped the child, I would have murdered my wife, I would have done all the crazy things. And it's not because I'm a good person and he's a bad person, but I've been lucky enough to be on a different life path. That's what it basically says. So if anything,
that's part of it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the whole truth.
Yeah.
Because you still had a choice, right? You still could have gone down the wrong path.
Right.
I've done that as well. Yeah. Like just out of curiosity and temptation, living the good life, good. And I'm like, this is boring. This is too much goodness. I need a little bit of bad. Okay, take some drugs. Self-harm.
Yeah, I've been there too.
Harm other people. We do it out of curiosity because we want to understand the light and the dark and the shadow. And this is the completion of the process of humanity itself, right? Is that we're on an exploration of consciousness itself. And this is what creates the feeling of transcendence, of transcending the pain of physical reality itself. Because now we're seeing ourselves as mortal. Seeing ourselves as impermanent, as not physical anymore, physical beings. And very few of us are lucky to have those experiences and those recurring experiences, those ongoing experiences, because they're very difficult to integrate as a human being. But yeah, I feel the sadness of that. I feel the grief of that. It's sad, that there's so many men who miss out on having an amazing father. And I never had a father, up until the age of 11. And my father showed up as best as he could, but on command of my mother. My mother basically threatened him and said, like, it's time for you to fucking show up because Alex needs you now, We've rejected him for 11 years. He needs you. But my grandmother instilled in me, my grandmother's a Sufi and an artist, a painter. And she's been lucky to not really work her whole life. She's worked as a nurse for a couple of decades, but she retired early because she lost her husband. She got German pension. A very hot, sensitive topic as well for a lot of Germans. I know you're not German. I know you're Austrian, but it is a lot of the younger German generations like, why are we paying for the old people? But she said to me, she wrote these beautiful poems about the boy, the young man who loses out on ever becoming a man because men are going to war. They're constantly trying to discover an adventure and, explore the world. Whereas the first priority is to protect your home, protect your family, make sure that they feel safe and secure, And the Vikings did great things, but at great risk. And many of them were taken out. Many of them were killed. many of their families and their bloodlines destroyed because many men had wild, passionate, out-of-body desires to go and conquer other lands and claim great riches. At what expense? Losing the richness of their own blood and their family. Many Vikings experienced great pain because of this. And I think this is the kind of the resolve, the inner spiritual resolve of the Brit, of the Englishman, is realizing the folly of colonialism and conquering other lands is the pain of the loss of your own people, you know.
Which you can only realize when you really start seeing the grander picture of it all.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have that greater awareness to that.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense at all to go to war. Like everyone loses all the time.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But the system's changing, right? I mean, COVID itself has changed that for all of us. We're all working from home now largely. We're going out, you know, less extensively. Yeah. And we're seeing, how can I maybe work at home? You know, what can I do online? It's goodness in that. It's benefit.
I'd love for us to you know, go more into to wrap up this very profound and beautiful and rich conversation with some practical advice, maybe, because you were also talking about hygiene, getting high on your genes as maybe the most important, most essential go-to strategy when it comes to, you know, cultivating that law of correspondence, or like tuning into the law of correspondence, so tidying up your inner house, basically, of all the crap, the trash, the bullshit thoughts, the limiting beliefs, the emotions that are still present for a reason, but then don't need to stay all the time. I think in your talk you mentioned, hey, thoughts, emotions, they're guests in my house. But I get to decide whether or not they're staying. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about like these hygiene principles and practical advice for listeners, what they could actually do now to apply more of what we've been talking about in this conversation.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this is like already seen in the media, and which is great. You know, I think there's a lot of benefits to social media, to industry. In, you know, when something becomes a fad, you know, then it's pushed, right? And we see the health industry is being pushed, natural medicine is being pushed, positive psychology and affirmations are being pushed on social media. It's amazing. It's allowing people to transform. And simple health, you know, and lifestyle hacks. I wrote a book, or a little document, a mini book called The 5 Highs of Hygiene. And I represent them by the Enzo. You know what the Enzo is?
No. Oh, the Enzo, so Zen circle.
The Zen circle.
Yeah.
So it's like the incomplete circle, right? So there's a little gap at the bottom. Yeah. There's a reason for that, because what is contained inside is not separate from outside of it. So it's all interconnected. So I use the Enzos to create these, kind of like Russian dolls, you know, these. So the symbol of this document is like all these 5 Enzos, the 5 highs of hygiene, is that, you know, once you purify, you get all these broken lines connecting, forming a circuit, forming a channel of energy, a charge, which is electricity. So environmental hygiene is the most important thing. You know, we need to keep our environment clean. Tidying up your garden, cleaning your home, you know, making sure there's not pesticides, herbicides, strong chemicals, pollution. As a collective, humanity, we need to address this element, this factor. It's a huge one, you know. Cleaning up the polluted oceans, the rivers, switching from chemical solvents and solutions to natural plant-based ones. You know, you can make amazing cleaning agents from essential oils, from the rinds, the skins of citrus fruits, you know, certain herbs, vegetables. You can make soaps and liquids that can clean just as well, because you can't destroy bacteria. You can't destroy pathogens. You can only move them from the environment and clean them by dissolving them gently, you know, by things that oppress and suppress their populations. But you can never completely exterminate them because they are part of the natural decomposition process of life. Everything is born, ages, dies, and is reborn. Same species are reborn. So life is actually just a continuation of the previous process. There is rarely no such thing as death. So the first thing is cleaning up your environment, then cleaning up your physical body, you know, so exercising and drinking fresh, you know, lots of fresh water, herbal teas, green juicing, juice fasting, water fasting, eating more plant-based foods, less meats, less sugars, less complex meals, simplifying your meals, you know. Then we get into emotional hygiene, releasing the emotions through breath work, through therapy, through screaming, shouting, you know, changing the memories, like going into the trauma, transforming the memory, transforming the trauma. Then we get into mental hygiene, which is the fourth, which is changing your thoughts, you know. So it's working on affirmations, observing the negative thoughts, not attaching to them, not reacting to them, not identifying with them. Many people identify with their thoughts, you know, because of the past. We like act in a certain way, and then we have the thought of acting in the same way. Now we think we are the thought. Whereas the thought is just allowing for the continuation of that behavior, because the body works on repetition. The body actually finds safety through familiarity. The body literally does this. It finds safety through familiarity. So even if you do the wrong thing or something non-beneficial or experiencing something toxic, a toxic emotion or a toxic thought or a toxic feeling, your body will choose that over something unfamiliar because it's familiar. Because the body finds safety in familiarity.
Yeah, so that's how good habits become your friends over time,
Exactly.
and bad habits become your enemies over time.
Or they become your friends.
Oh, that, yeah.
The bad habits actually become your friends, you know, because they're the only friends you've got. You know,
right.
so
they give you comfort and soothing.
Yes, exactly. And this is why people get so addicted to their depression and their anxiety and their self-loathing, self-hate.
Because it's
so
familiar.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about understanding, having this understanding, observing, not attaching again, not getting addicted to, creating new habits. It's a messy process. It's not clean, you know, but we're cleaning. We're cleaning up. We're finding hygiene. Then we get to the ultimate, the pinnacle, spiritual hygiene. Now we put our trust and our faith, we surrender to something bigger than ourselves. It doesn't have to be a Christian God. It doesn't have to be Allah. It can be something of your own creation. But connect with something grander than yourself. Because there are things bigger than you. A house is bigger than you. A car is bigger than you. The moon is bigger than you. It's higher than you. It's further up than you. The clouds are further up than you, you know. Create something of your own form, your own image, that you can fall in love with, that you can have reverence for, that you can surrender to. Even just for a moment. That is a form of spiritual hygiene, as opposed to glorifying and idealizing money, you know, and material possessions which come and go. This t-shirt is going to break down. It's going to have holes in it. The thread is going to unravel.
It already does, actually.
It already is. That's my style. That's my style. That's my fashion.
It was a joke.
I know. I don't take it personally. But our hair falls out. You know, if we become attached to the things that do change, inevitably, you cannot control this process. It will change. If you attach to it, it will bring you great pain and suffering. But if you attach to your observer, if you attach to the witness, you attach to that which is infinite, immortal, eternal, endless,
Never changing.
never changing, that brings you great liberation, great freedom from pain and suffering. Now you've reached the pinnacle of hygiene. And this is when, and once you've done all of those, you know, you've purified and cleaned all of those enzos, all of those circles. So for those who don't know what an enzo is, E-N-S-O, look it up. An enzo, it's the Zen symbol, and we connect them all together and we get this channel, this line of energy. And this is your kundalini. It shoots you up to the spiritual realms, and this is when you experience bliss. This is when you get goose pimples. You can see my goose pimples, my hairs are standing on end. Because I'm talking about something that is very real for me. I experience it, it's truth. I'm experiencing this bliss right now. I'm feeling the bliss because my system is clean. My body is clean. My mind is clean. My heart is clean. My intestines are clean. I've been doing the cleaning. The environment's clean. I mean, you can see us, I sweep the floor every few days.
You get some ants there, but...
Yeah, for sure. I don't sweep every morning. Then I get fanatical and obsessed, right?
Yes.
I like to sweep every second or third day.
Yeah.
It creates non-attachment. Then these are very simple and practical things that everyone can do, that can bring you to greater and greater spiritual hygiene. And when you do this, your genes, your DNA starts spinning.
Yeah.
Literally starts spinning. It starts producing sound, vibration in your body. And this is what the monks talk about. They don't need to take psychedelics and LSD and MDMA to have these experiences. They have them all the time in their meditations, because deep stillness and deep presence and connectedness with self creates a spiral of energy. So the phi, the line, and the circle is a two-dimensional representation of the spiral. The spiral is a three-dimensional representation of the phi. And everything is spiraling into itself and out of itself, coming back in and back out.
That's literally what we talk about when we talk about vibrating on a higher and higher frequency. So you get more in tune with the higher frequency that's surrounding you everywhere.
Yes.
And that's how you get your signals. That's how you know with a full body response sometimes if something's right or wrong. Because you get just freaking goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because you know it's true for you.
Yeah. Resonance and dissonance, right? Harmony and disharmony. Like, none of these things are bad, these depression, anxiety. They're taking us into states that are showing us the opposite of what we want, actually. And what is bringing greater bliss and greater joy and greater pleasure, And everyone has access to this, And this hygiene is going to get your genes high, and it's going to get you high off your genes. And that is the secret code of the word hygiene for me, is getting high off my genes, because I purify my DNA through terrain theory, through understanding that my environment is constantly changing, and therefore it is informing me on how to grow and change myself and to become better.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, brother, for this conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
I appreciated that so much. Diving into those fields, kind of flowing around between all the different aspects, and I feel you were weaving it together in such a beautiful way to really have it applicable and understand it on a more profound level in life itself, like in your human experience here on this planet Earth, and this vessel and this beautiful body that is such a highly advanced technology, isn't it? Actually.
Yeah, I don't sew or knit. I wish I did, but my mom is a designer. Fashion designer and a costumier. She makes costumes for like theater. So I've been witness to all kinds of creations, and that's a weaving process, right? So I feel like one of the gifts my mom gave me was to show me that everything is woven together. Even the things we cannot see, they're all woven together. Life is a tapestry. I think that's why we love to look at tapestries on the wall, because it's such a work of art. It's like you see this painting that someone has woven. It's like, it's magnificent. It's a miracle how someone managed to create a picture from weaving colorful thread. That's life. I feel like consciousness and God and the all mind, the super conscious mind that exists without a brain, without a body, in matter itself on a quantum level, is guiding all of us to these experiences, to these synchronicities and these serendipities that create wonder and awe, and like, wow, how did that happen? That's a miracle. It's organizing all of this all the time. The AI, or whatever you want to call it, whatever labels.
The mystery of life.
The mystery of life, the Tao, the way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Alex. Namaste.
Namaste.
so unglaubliche Gänsehautmomente und berührende Gedanken zu unserem menschlichen Dasein und dieser Reise, die jeder und jede von uns erlebt. Wieder so ein Gespräch, für das ich einfach nur wirklich dankbar bin. Vor allem, weil ich es mit dir teilen konnte. Wenn du mehr über Alex erfahren möchtest, findest du wie immer die Links zu seiner Arbeit und zu seinem Wirken in den Shownotes. Lass mir sehr gerne deine Gedanken zum Gespräch unter dem Post zur Folge auf Instagram da, @jakob.horvath. Und wenn dich die Inhalte des Podcasts ansprechen und sie dir gut tun, dann würdest du mir einen Riesengefallen tun, wenn du diese Folge mit Menschen teilst, denen sie ebenfalls gut tun würde. Oder gerne auch eine andere deiner Lieblingsfolgen. Wenn du meine Arbeit gerne direkt unterstützen möchtest, dann kannst du mich einmal im Monat umgerechnet auf einen Cappuccino mit Hafermilch einladen. Damit finanziere ich Software für den Podcast, technisches Equipment und mehr. Dazu findest du alle Infos auf soulbase.jakob.horvath.com. Den Link dazu stelle ich dir natürlich auch in die Shownotes. Und wenn du einmal im Monat mit der Community und mit mir gemeinsam live meditieren möchtest und Zugang zu allen Aufzeichnungen und einer stetig wachsenden Meditationsmediathek haben möchtest, dann schau ebenfalls mal in der SOULBASE-Community vorbei. Dort findest du alle Infos zum Membership. Ich freue mich, dich dort zu sehen. Bis bald und alles Liebe, dein Jakob.